Welcome back. Um, Today's video, we're just going to look at just updating our Veeam environment. So we configured Veeam a little bit earlier on in a different video. We installed the software and we configured an agent-based backup of our technically physical virtual machine of MELDC1, which is our domain controller. We have now since implemented a VMware environment with a vCenter and configured a couple of virtual machines, including the vCenter itself, plus an additional domain controller, which is a virtualized domain controller in our vSphere environment. So today we're going to just configure the backups of our vSphere virtual machines. And the way that I'm going to do this is usually the way that I recommend most of my customers to back up their virtual workloads, and that's through the use of tags. That's VMware tags. So in VMware, we can assign tags to our virtual machines based on however we might want to segregate our virtual machines from one another. Maybe we want to group them in a way that makes sense to our organization, but we can also group them in a way that makes sense to our backup strategy. And so let's head into our lab and configure up the tags. You'll see how this makes sense. So I'll just drop into our VMware environment, and we configure tags through the menu option and down the bottom here, tags and custom attributes. So what we need is category. So for instance, I might call this category Melbourne Veeam Backups, and I only want to assign these tags to just virtual machines. So you can obviously tag different components of your VMware environment, but I'm only interested in tagging virtual machines. So I've got a category called Melbourne Veeam Backups, and then I create a tag. Now, the way that I'm going to tag these virtual machines from a backup point of view is, as already discussed in a previous video, I'm going to do application aware backups and then just normal standard backups, so without the application aware option. So if I just quickly flick back into our Veeam server, here we have our agent-based backup, and if I go into here and look at guest processing, this is an application aware processed backup, and that's because it's a domain controller. So anything, as mentioned, anything like a domain controller, Exchange server, SharePoint server, SQL server, or an Oracle server even, we can do native application aware processing in Veeam by ticking this option. So that's going to suit obviously certain workloads in your environment, and then there are going to be others where you don't need the application aware processing at all. So you could potentially just uncheck that option and bypass this process. So for it to all make a little bit more sense, let's call this application aware backups, and it's in the Melbourne Veeam Backups category. And then I'll create another tag called, normally I just call it simple backups. Simple backups, the category in the same category. So a virtual machine essentially can be assigned one or the other of these two tags. They can't be assigned both. So that's the way that I've set this up. So if I go now to our virtual machines, VMs and templates will do. So MELDC2, I want it to be an application aware backup. So whenever I create a new virtual machine now, I can just assign it one of these two tags. And what that's going to mean from a Veeam point of view is that that particular virtual machine will be assigned to the correct backup job in Veeam. So let's have a look at tagging, assign a tag, and it's giving us an option. What would you like to assign it? Actually, I haven't got it on a, that needs to be, let me go back and configure the tag. Actually, I don't know if I can reconfigure the category now that I've created it. Let's check. Tags per object. No, it's one. I don't think allow me to tick both then, but it's technically shouldn't allow me to. Let me just see what happens if I. So this is MELDC2. I wanted to have an application aware backup. We go assign. Now if I went in here and tried to assign another tag, okay, cool. There's no options. I can't assign the other one, so it is one or the other. So that's really good. Now if I did need it to be assigned to other backup jobs, maybe replication jobs, then I'd create a different. I'd create an additional category called, say, Melbourne replication jobs, and then create probably similar tags, application aware, and so forth. And then I could assign MELDC2 to a, say, a replication job as well as a backup job. And MELVCSA, I will assign the tag simple backup. And that's pretty much it. So they've been tagged, and now I can associate that to my backup jobs in Veeam. So let's do that. Okay, so we are back in our Veeam console. Now the first thing we need to do is update our infrastructure. So at this stage, all we have really is a protection group where MELDC1, our physical server, if you like, doing agent-based backups. Now I'm going to add our vCenter. So come down to manage servers, we add a server, and here we have an array of options. It's a VMware vSphere, and it's a vSphere, so we can either use a standalone ESXi host or a vCenter server. We obviously have a vCenter server, so I'm going to go ahead and choose the name of that server. Now we need to provide credentials, so we obviously need a level of privileges to access our vSphere environment. So all I'm going to do here is just add our administrator at vSphere.local details. So bearing in mind from a previous video when we set up vCenter, this is so we need the vSphere.local domain credentials to access our VMware environment from Veeam. And apply. And we haven't updated the certificate yet, so we'll do that at a later stage. Guess if this was going to fail, it would have already done it by now because it seems like it's happy. It is. Next, and finished. And now we've got a VMware vSphere environment connected to our Veeam environment. And we can see all the way down into the cluster level where we've got an ESXi host. So now we're ready to do some backups. Actually, we'll just check our proxies. We only have the one server, so it's this server that's doing the proxy work. So as already mentioned, the proxy work is the kind of the workhorse of the Veeam product. The proxy server is the one that will inspect the virtual machines and do all the processing work and move it to repository. So MELVBR, which is this host that we're on, is actually covering that job for us. At a later stage, we'll probably use a different proxy server to do that work. So let's head in and create our first VMware backup job. So backup, and now where we went with those computer for our protection group, this time we are going to virtual machine. and just checking the naming conventions there, but it's going to be Melbourne Application Aware Backups, nice and simple. Priority is fine. So this is where the tags are going to come into place. So I could manually just add virtual machines like this and be okay with that, but it would mean that I would have to remember that if I configure a new virtual machine, I need to make sure that I come back in here and add a virtual machine to a backup job. But if I happen to, as part of my onboarding process of a virtual machine here in VMware, if I make sure that that onboarding process includes assigning a backup tag, then I don't need to go into Veeam when using tags for my backup jobs to update virtual machines. So we've got the option here to either backup by hosts and clusters. We could use VM and templates, which would pretty much yield the same result. But here we could define folders as a potential way to manage our backups. So if we put a virtual machine in this folder, and this folder was the target folder for a backup job, or was the source folder for a backup job, then any new virtual machines that would go into this folder would be part of that backup job. And similar with data store. So if I chose data store, that would be fine. But also remember, if you're doing it this way, then we can't really easily differentiate between the style of backup jobs that we want to assign. So obviously some virtual machines we want to do application aware, and some we want to do just as a simple backup. If we were to do it by data store, then we would kind of have to know that maybe our gold data store is for simple backups and our silver data store would be for our application aware backups, but that's no way to really manage your VMware environment. So the best bet is tags, and what we'll see in here is our Melbourne Veeam Backups, which is the category that we created, and then we have our two options here, application aware backups. We open it up, see what virtual machines are included, and then our simple backups. So if I just choose this option, application aware backups, we'll automatically pick up any virtual machine with that tag and do an application aware backup on it. And that's probably the best way to manage your environment. If you've got hundreds of virtual machines, definitely got to use tags to manage your backups. Right, so we'll click next. I'll leave this as automatic selection, so it's asking which proxy server is going to do the work. I'll just do automatic. There is only one proxy server, that's this physical VBR server, and the Veeam repository is the only repository that we have, so we'll target that, and our retention policies will be, for now, everything's just on 14 days for now with no GFS backups. Again, we'll change that at a later stage. And in our advanced options, there's a couple of spots here that I always make sure I look at, and that is that I want a forward incremental with a synthetic full. You can check my previous video, I sort of described the difference between these options. I want to, every Saturday, create that synthetic full backup. It's all going to sit on REFS, so I'm going to get that storage saving capacity for any duplicated blocks that are created as a result of this synthetic full. So I'm happy with that. I don't perform any maintenance tasks because we are periodically creating full backups. I leave the storage settings as default. Again, in a later video, we'll talk a little bit more of these in detail. I don't have any SFTP set up as of yet, even though I do have an Exchange server now, so I might do that at a later stage. And from a vSphere point of view, I'm happy with this option. So we're going to use the native change block tracking services from from VMware. You can enable this option if you've got a virtual machine that's running particular software where it doesn't have the native application aware processing option available. So if it's not using Microsoft VSS, there is another way you could potentially get application aware type processing of a virtual machine by enabling VMware Tools QEssence. Seldom ever come across a situation where I need to use that. And the only other important part here is I do not want to use storage snapshots at this stage. I will configure storage snapshots at a later stage, and I'll have a video on that. But for now, I'll just use basic VM snapshots. So that's essentially going into vSphere. Go back here. It's going to do automatically. It's going to create a snapshot temporarily and then take a backup and then remove the snapshot once the backup's complete. So I'm happy with that. And next, I'm going to tick this box. I don't need to do anything inside applications. It is just a domain controller for Mail DC2. If I were to have such as like a SQL server, I might come up in here and configure transactional log processing in a way that would meet my business needs. But for now, it's just a domain controller that we're backing up, so that's all okay. The guest interaction proxy, we are doing application aware, so you technically go inside the guest to do the application aware processing component, and we nominate a proxy for that as well. Again, it will be this VBR server. Because we are going inside the guest, we need to provide some credentials. I'll just use the administrator one for now and do a quick test. So automatically detects that Mail DC2 is going to be part of this backup job. It's part of that tagging mechanism. But it looks like it's going to, yep, it's going to pass. That's good. And the next bit is the scheduling. And generally speaking, I just run my backup jobs one after another. So the first one here, I hate this screen tear that's happening. But the Melbourne agent backups is it's the backup job that runs at the scheduled time. So I'll just change this to say once Melbourne agent backups is complete, then you can start. So it's pretty straightforward. And click finished. Done. So there we've got a Windows agent backup and a VMware backup. And now we'll just quickly run through and do the other one, which is the Melbourne simple backups. Again, this is going to be done by tags. So I'll just quickly go in here, choose simple backups. Next, to 14, and I'll leave this as normal. I'll just turn off the storage snapshots for now. No guest processing. It's basically just going to take a snapshot of the virtual machine, take a backup, no matter what the situation is for what's happening inside the guest OS. And I'll run this one after the application aware backups. Done. So what I might do, I might just run these three in order with a bit of a time lapse, and we'll have a look at it once it's all complete. Okay, so those virtual machines have now been backed up. So we did an incremental of our agent backup of MELDC1, followed by 2 active full backups because they're the first backups for MELDC2 and MELVCSA. And if we shift over here to our left, and we can actually now see that we are starting to build up a little bit of a repository of backups that we can potentially restore from. So obviously there's going to be some additional options here now, which is really good. Gives us a little bit of flexibility on what we can restore, so we can restore anything from the entire VM, specific virtual disks. We can restore VM files, so they're sort of relating to the virtual machine themselves, but we can also inspect the guest OS and restore files. And because this was completed an application aware backup, it understood that this server is a domain controller and gives us the ability to do an Active Directory object restore. So if we accidentally deleted a computer object or a user object in Active Directory, we could actually quickly come in here and restore that straight out of the backup. Here we don't see that option to do application style restore. We can still inspect the guest OS to do a restore from, but everything else kind of remains the same. The other thing also to note is this instant recovery, which is an awesome feature of Veeam. I can actually get this, whether this is a simulated lab environment or a real life production environment. Generally, it's literally seconds to restore a single virtual machine through the instant recovery. Basically, just mounts it into VMware straight off the repository that it's living on, and whilst that machine is running off the repository, you can slowly start copying all the data out of repository back to the original location whilst that virtual machine is still going and operational and accessible by its users. So we'll have a look at some of those restore options and go through, do a bit of testing later on down the track. But at the moment, I think we're kind of all happy at the moment. So got a few backup jobs running each night. So that's going to build up a decent retention up to 14 days. So this is going to grow out nicely. We have a quick look actually just on our repository. There we've got 3 VMs, one of which has been backed up 4 times now, and we've used about 180 gig of space. So potentially getting a little bit of dedupe savings and compression savings as well. So for now, that's where we'll leave Veeam. My next video is to look at preparing a Linux repository server. So we're going to add a Linux repository server to Veeam, and this feature will allow us, or this repository will allow us to use the immutability feature within Veeam, which is a very on-topic subject at the moment, given the circumstances that a lot of organisations are facing. Protection from ransomware is crucial. So that's what we're going to have a look at our next upcoming video. For now, thank you very much.